Have you ever said yes to something you didn't want to do, just to avoid disappointing someone? Or spent hours explaining your decisions, only to feel like no one really cared? Maybe you've been in a meeting where your ideas were ignored, only to see someone else praised for saying the exact same thing. These moments can leave you feeling invisible, undervalued, and questioning your self-worth. In Buddhism, these struggles are seen as opportunities, not failures. They are mirrors reflecting our inner state of balance and self-respect. When our sense of self is grounded and steady, the world reflects that back to us. Here's the truth. Respect doesn't come from trying harder to please others or endlessly proving yourself. It starts from within. When you value yourself with mindfulness, when you act with clarity and compassion, respect becomes a natural outcome, not something you need to chase. In this video, we'll explore 6 principles deeply rooted in Buddhist wisdom and daily practice. These insights will help you transform how others perceive you and, more importantly, how you perceive yourself. If you've ever felt overlooked or uncertain about how to earn respect, this is your chance to begin anew. Let's take the first step together. 1. Stop over-explaining yourself. Trust in your decisions. There was a man named Jack who lived in a bustling American suburb. Jack was the kind of person who always tried to keep everyone happy. If someone asked him for help, he'd say yes, even when he didn't have the time. When he had to say no, he'd spend minutes, sometimes hours, explaining why, trying to make sure no one felt upset. But lately, Jack felt drained. He noticed that the more he tried to explain himself, the less satisfied people seemed. His coworker asked why he couldn't stay late to finish a project, and Jack found himself listing every detail of his packed evening schedule. Yet his colleagues still sighed in frustration. At a family dinner, he declined an invitation to a weekend trip, but after 5 minutes of justifying, he still saw disappointment in his cousin's eyes. No matter how much he explained, it was never enough. One weekend, feeling overwhelmed, Jack decided to go hiking in a nearby forest to clear his mind. As he walked, he stumbled upon a serene Buddhist temple nestled among the trees. Curious, he stepped inside and found a monk sweeping the floor with calm, deliberate movements. "Excuse me," Jack said, hesitantly. "I've been struggling with something, and I wonder if you could help me." The monk looked up with a gentle smile. "Of course. What troubles you?" Jack poured out his frustrations. "I feel like I'm constantly explaining myself. I want people to understand why I make certain decisions, but no matter what I say, it's never enough. I end up feeling worse, like I've lost control of the situation." The monk listened patiently, then asked, "Why do you feel the need to explain so much?" Jack paused, unsure. "I guess I don't want people to think I'm selfish or uncaring. I want them to understand me." The monk nodded and motioned for Jack to sit beside him. "In Buddhism," he began, "we teach that true peace comes from within, not from others' approval. When you feel the urge to explain, it's often because you are seeking validation outside of yourself. But the truth is, you don't need to justify your path to anyone. If your intentions are clear and your actions come from a place of compassion, that is enough." He picked up a small pebble and tossed it into a pond nearby. The ripples spread outward, one after another, until the water returned to stillness. "Your words are like this pebble," the monk said. "When you speak too much, You create ripples of doubt and misunderstanding. But when you speak with clarity and trust, the water settles and peace returns. Jack thought about this as he walked back home. The next day, when his friend asked why he couldn't attend a dinner party, Jack paused. Instead of giving a long explanation, he simply said, "Thank you for inviting me, but I won't be able to make it this time." To his surprise, his friend smiled and said, "No problem. Maybe next time." Over the following weeks, Jack practiced saying less and trusting more. When his boss asked him to take on an extra project, he said, "I appreciate the opportunity, but I'm at full capacity right now." When a neighbor questioned why he wasn't joining the neighborhood committee, he responded, "I have other priorities at the moment, but I hope the group does well." At first, Jack felt awkward. He worried that people might think he was rude or uncaring. But over time, he noticed a change, not just in how others reacted, but in how he felt. By letting go of the need to over-explain, Jack felt lighter, more confident. He realized that his need to justify himself was a reflection of his own self-doubt. The monk's words stayed with him. When you trust yourself, others will feel that trust. And if they don't, it's their journey, not yours. Jack found peace in simplicity. He spoke less but with more intention. And just like the still pond, his life became calmer, clearer, and more balanced. 2. Protect your time. Value what you cannot regain. Ethan loved weekends. It was the only time he could escape the chaos of his demanding job and catch his breath. But this weekend was different. By 9 a.m. on Saturday, Ethan had already received 3 phone calls. A friend needed help moving, a coworker wanted advice on a project, and his neighbor was asking him to join the planning committee for the upcoming block party. Without thinking, Ethan agreed to all 3. By the end of the day, he was exhausted, his own plans abandoned, and his mind restless. That night, as he lay awake staring at the ceiling, he asked himself, "Why do I always say yes? And why do I feel worse every time I do?" The next morning, desperate for clarity, Ethan decided to visit a local Buddhist center he had heard about from a colleague. During the session, the teacher shared a profound story. "Imagine a man walking through the desert," the teacher began. "He carries a small flask of water. Along the way, he meets people who ask for a sip. Out of kindness, he gives them a little. But as the desert stretches on, he realizes he has nothing left, not for himself, nor for anyone else. His generosity, though well-meaning, has left him empty." The teacher paused, looking around the room. "Time," he said, "is like that flask of water. If you give it away carelessly, there will be nothing left for the journey that truly matters." Ethan felt as though the story was meant for him. He realized that his habit of saying yes to everyone wasn't just draining his energy, it was a reflection of deeper fears. He was afraid of disappointing people, of being seen as selfish, or of missing out. But at what cost? In Buddhism, time is seen as both precious and impermanent. The Buddha often likened life to a candle, burning steadily but inevitably running out. Each moment is unique, and once it's gone, it cannot be reclaimed. To spend time mindlessly, or on things that don't align with one's values, is to lose a part of life that can never be replaced. The teacher explained that protecting one's time isn't selfish, it's an act of mindfulness and compassion. "When you say yes to everything," he said, You are actually saying no to the things that matter most: your peace, your growth, and your ability to be fully present for the people you truly care about. Over the next few weeks, Ethan began practicing the Buddhist principle of mindful intention. Before agreeing to anything, he paused and asked himself, "Does this align with my values? Will saying yes bring me joy or fulfillment? Am I agreeing out of fear or obligation?" For the first time, Ethan began saying no, not with guilt, but with clarity and kindness. When his neighbor asked him to join the committee, he simply said, "I appreciate you asking, but I can't commit to that right now." When his coworker requested weekend help, Ethan replied, "I hope the project goes well, but I need to focus on my own priorities this weekend." At first, it felt uncomfortable, but as time went on, Ethan noticed a profound shift. His days felt lighter, his mind clearer, and his energy more focused. He began meditating regularly and spending time on projects he had long neglected. By protecting his time, he was not only reclaiming his life, but also learning to live more intentionally. Buddhism teaches that time is life's most precious currency. To spend it wisely is to honor the gift of existence. Ethan's journey was a reminder of this truth. Time is fleeting, but its value grows when used with purpose. Protecting it isn't just a practical skill, it's a spiritual practice, a way of aligning one's actions with one's deepest values. As the teacher had said, every moment is a choice. Choose wisely, and you'll find not only time but also peace. 3. Stand your ground. Strength with compassion. There was a woman named Claire who worked at a bustling advertising agency. Claire was known for her kind demeanor and willingness to accommodate everyone. If someone asked her to revise a project at the last minute, she'd do it without question. If a colleague interrupted her during a presentation, she'd step aside and let them speak. While Claire's kindness was appreciated, it often came at a cost. She felt invisible, undervalued, and unheard. One day, during a team meeting, Claire presented an idea she had spent weeks perfecting. As she was halfway through her explanation, her boss interrupted and redirected the conversation to another colleague. Claire froze, her heart sinking. She wanted to speak up but didn't want to appear confrontational. So, she stayed silent, watching her idea fade into the background. That evening, Claire shared her frustration with a friend who had recently returned from a Buddhist retreat. The friend said, "You know, kindness is a beautiful thing, but it needs balance. The Buddha taught that compassion and strength must go hand in hand. Otherwise, people might mistake your kindness for weakness." Intrigued, Claire began exploring Buddhist teachings about balance and boundaries. She learned that standing your ground isn't about confrontation or aggression. It's about respecting yourself as much as you respect others. The Buddha himself taught that firmness rooted in compassion creates harmony. It allows us to protect our values without harming others. Claire decided to test this wisdom. At the next meeting, she prepared herself mentally. When her boss interrupted her again, she paused, took a breath, and said calmly, "I'd like to finish sharing my idea before we move on. I believe it could add value to the discussion." Her voice was steady, her tone kind but firm. The room fell silent. Her boss nodded, signaling her to continue. For the first time, Claire felt heard. She wasn't just speaking up for her idea, she was standing up for herself. Over the following weeks, Claire began practicing this approach in different situations. When a colleague tried to push extra work onto her plate, she responded, "I'd love to help, but I'm already at capacity. Let's find another solution." When friends asked her to do things that didn't align with her priorities, she politely declined without guilt. Claire's newfound ability to stand her ground transformed not only how others saw her, but also how she saw herself. She realized that her kindness was more powerful when paired with strength. Buddhism teaches that strength isn't about overpowering others. It's about staying rooted in your truth while remaining open and compassionate. One teaching that resonated deeply with Claire was the concept of the middle way. The Buddha described this as the path of balance, not leaning too far into passivity or aggression, but finding the harmony between the two. By standing her ground with compassion, Claire was embodying the middle way in her daily life. She also reflected on the Buddhist principle of right speech, speaking truthfully, kindly, and at the right time. By choosing her words carefully and delivering them with clarity, Claire was able to assert herself without creating conflict. Years later, Claire looked back on that pivotal moment in the meeting and felt immense gratitude. She had learned that standing her ground wasn't just about earning respect from others, it was about showing respect to herself. And when she combined that strength with compassion, it became a force that inspired trust and admiration. As the Buddha said, "A jug fills drop by drop." Each small act of courage and kindness added to Claire's growing sense of confidence. She discovered that when you stand firm with compassion, you don't just create boundaries, you create bridges, connecting with others while staying true to yourself. 4. Do what you say you'll do. Be someone others can rely on. Michael was the kind of person everyone liked to be around. He was charming, full of ideas, and always seemed to have a plan. But there was one problem: Michael rarely followed through. He would promise to meet a deadline, only to miss it. He would commit to helping a friend, then cancel at the last minute. At first, people were forgiving. "He's just busy," they thought. But over time, the excuses wore thin, and the trust they once had in Michael began to fade. One day, Michael's best friend, Sarah, confronted him. "Michael, I love you, but I can't rely on you anymore. You always have the best intentions, but your actions don't match your words. I feel like I can't trust you." Her words stung. Michael had always thought his charisma and good intentions were enough. But now, he saw the truth. His broken promises were not just hurting his relationships, they were eroding his own sense of self-worth. Feeling lost, Michael decided to visit a Buddhist meditation center near his home. During a group discussion, the teacher shared a powerful teaching. In Buddhism, we speak of integrity as a cornerstone of trust. When your actions align with your words, you create harmony within yourself and with others. But when you break your word, even unintentionally, you create dissonance that ripples through your life. Michael reflected on the concept of karma, the idea that every action creates a ripple effect. Each time he broke a promise, it wasn't just an isolated event. It was a seed of distrust planted in his relationships. And each broken promise to himself, whether it was skipping a workout or procrastinating on a goal, was a seed of self-doubt growing within him. The teacher also shared a story from the Buddha's time. A disciple once asked the Buddha how to build trust with others. The Buddha replied, "Trust is built through consistent, truthful actions. A tree grows strong not because of one storm, but because of years of steady sunlight and rain." so too must our words and actions align, day after day, for trust to flourish. Inspired by these teachings, Michael decided to change. He started small. When he promised Sarah he'd meet her for coffee, he arrived on time. No excuses. When he told his boss he'd complete a project by Friday, he worked diligently to deliver as promised. At first, it was challenging. Old habits pulled at him, and the temptation to make excuses lingered. But Michael remembered the Buddha's words, "A tree grows strong through consistency." Michael also began practicing mindfulness. Before making a commitment, he paused and asked himself, "Can I realistically keep this promise? Am I saying yes because I mean it, or because I'm afraid to disappoint?" This simple practice helped him avoid overcommitting and focus on the promises he could truly honor. As he followed through on his commitments, something remarkable happened. People began to trust Michael again. But more importantly, Michael began to trust himself. Each kept promise was a step toward rebuilding his integrity. He realized that integrity wasn't about being perfect, it was about being accountable. When he made a mistake, he owned it and worked to make it right. Through his journey, Michael also embraced the Buddhist principle of right effort, putting energy into actions that lead to harmony and growth. By aligning his actions with his words, he not only rebuilt trust with others, but also discovered a sense of peace and self-respect he hadn't felt in years. Years later, Sarah told Michael, "You're not just someone I like to be around anymore, you're someone I can depend on." Her words reflected the transformation Michael had worked so hard to achieve. He understood now that trust wasn't given, it was earned, one action at a time. As the Buddha said, one is not called noble who harms living beings. By not harming living beings, one is called noble. By keeping his word, Michael had stopped harming himself and others with broken promises. Instead, he had become someone noble, someone others could rely on, and someone he could respect in the mirror. 5. Stop complaining about fixable problems. Take responsibility for your life. Emma was known among her friends as the person who could always find something to complain about. "Work is so stressful," she'd sigh. "I never have time to exercise. My apartment is always messy. Nothing ever seems to go my way." Her friends would nod politely, offering suggestions, but they noticed a pattern. Emma rarely acted on their advice. She vented, but nothing changed. One day, after a particularly long rant about her busy schedule, her friend David said something that stopped her in her tracks. "Emma, you talk a lot about what's wrong, but what are you doing to fix it?" Emma was stunned. She started to defend herself but realized David was right. Her complaints were like a rocking chair. They gave her something to do but got her nowhere. Feeling frustrated with herself, Emma decided to visit a local Buddhist center she had heard about. She hoped to find some clarity on how to break free from this cycle. During a talk at the center, the teacher shared a teaching from the Buddha. "The mind is everything. What you think, you become." The teacher explained that our complaints often come from a place of resistance to reality. When we focus on what's wrong without taking action, we create suffering for ourselves and those around us. But when we shift our mindset from complaining to responsibility, we empower ourselves to transform our lives. Emma felt as though these words were directed at her. She realized that every complaint she voiced was a way of avoiding responsibility. Her messy apartment wasn't the universe's fault. It was hers for not tidying up. Her lack of exercise wasn't due to her schedule. It was because she hadn't prioritized it. Her work stress wasn't an unsolvable problem. It was something she could manage with better boundaries and planning. The teacher continued, "In Buddhism, we talk about the Four Noble Truths. The first truth is that suffering exists. But the second truth reminds us that much of our suffering comes from craving or attachment, wanting things to be different than they are. When we let go of that attachment and take mindful action, we find freedom." Inspired, Emma decided to take a different approach to her life. The next time she caught herself complaining, she paused and asked herself two questions. Can I fix this? If the answer was yes, she made a plan. If I can't fix it, how can I accept it? She practiced letting go of what was beyond her control. At work, instead of saying, "I have no time for anything," she started organizing her schedule and setting boundaries. She told her boss, "I can't take on extra tasks this week, but I'll make sure my current projects are finished on time." At home, instead of saying, "My apartment is always a mess," she dedicated 15 minutes each day to cleaning. And instead of lamenting her lack of fitness, she started taking short walks during lunch breaks. Emma also embraced gratitude, another key teaching in Buddhism. She kept a journal where she wrote down 3 things she was thankful for each day. This practice helped her shift her focus from what was wrong to what was going well. She began to see her life not as a series of problems, but as a collection of opportunities for growth. The changes didn't happen overnight. There were still days when Emma felt overwhelmed or tempted to complain. But she reminded herself of another teaching from the Buddha: you yourself must strive. The Buddhas only point the way. Emma understood that the power to change her life was within her. It just required consistent effort and mindfulness. Months later, her friends noticed a transformation. Emma wasn't just happier, she was proactive. When challenges arose, she faced them head-on instead of retreating into complaints. Her friend David joked, "You've become the person who finds solutions instead of problems." Emma smiled, knowing that the shift had come from within. By taking responsibility for her life, she had discovered a deeper sense of peace and purpose. She had learned that while she couldn't control everything, she could control her attitude and actions. And that made all the difference. As the Buddha said, "No one saves us but ourselves. No one can, and no one may. We ourselves must walk the path." Emma had stopped waiting for life to fix itself and started walking her own path, one step, one action, one choice at a time. Conclusion: Building respect through actions, a journey of self-mastery. Respect isn't something you demand. It's something you cultivate, step by step, through the choices you make every day. As we've explored, earning respect begins with how you see yourself. When you align your actions with your values, trust your decisions, and live with mindfulness, respect flows naturally, not just from others, but from within. Whether it's protecting your time, standing your ground, or taking responsibility for your life, each action you take builds the foundation of self-respect. And when you respect yourself, you inspire others to do the same. But remember, this isn't a one-time effort. As the Buddha teaches, a jug fills drop by drop. Every small, intentional choice adds to the person you are becoming. The journey may be challenging, but it is also deeply rewarding. With each step, you're not just building respect, you're building a life of purpose and authenticity. Now, here's your next step. Pick one principle from this video and start applying it today. Whether it's saying no to something that doesn't align with your priorities or speaking with confidence and compassion, take that first step. And when you see the changes it brings, come back and share your story. I'd love to hear how these practices have shaped your journey. If this video gave you something to think about or inspired you to take action, don't keep it to yourself. Hit the like button to let me know. Subscribe to join this community of mindful living. And share this video with someone who could use a little boost in their journey to self-respect. Let's grow together. Until next time, remember, respect begins with you. Every action you take today shapes the person you're becoming tomorrow. See you in the next one.